Okay, so we had a short story on a painting of Gustav Klimt. They are kneeling upright on a flower bed. He has just caught her there and holds her still. Her gown has slipped down off her shoulder. He has an urgent hunger. His dark head bends to hers hungrily. And the woman, turns her tangerine lips from his, one hand like a head of a dead swan draped down over his heavy neck. The fingers strangely crimped together, tightly together, her other arm doubled up against her tight breast, her hand a languid claw clutching his hand, which would turn her mouth to his. Her long dress made of multicolored blossoms quilted on gold. Her Titan, Titan hair, I, with blue stars in it.
And his gold harlequin robe checkered with dark squares. Gold garlands streamed down over her brave calves and tensed feet, her bare calves and tensed feet. Near by there must be a jeweled tree with glass leaves aglitter in the gold air. It must be morning in a faraway place somewhere. They are silent together, as in a flowered field upon the summer couch, which must be hers, and he holds her still, so passionately, holds her head to his, so gently, so insistently, to make her turn her lips to his. Her eyes are closed, like folded petals. She will not open. He is not the one.
Okay, now we got the PowerPoint. So let me get to the first slide because for some reason I was on the last one. So we had a like postmodernism beat poetry. This poem is a dactyl. In the very beginning, you can tell how he puts stress on the first syllable rather than any of the others. He like really puts stress on like he and like makes it its own line, and like he makes like a purpose of like separating the lines of it. A dactyl has three syllables with the stress on the first one. This is immediately present starting at line 2 through 4 when he puts stress on he in line 2. This poem is also from the postmodernism era. It was brought to life through the reaction to modernism. Many themes show up in this type of poetry are historical or political. It can also be a pyrrhic. The pyrrhic foot consists of two unstressed syllables. This type of foot is rare and is found interspersed with other feet. That's most likely why it's also paired with the dactyl, because if you find the pyrrhic, it's usually paired with something else. And the two unstressed syllables are the ones following he in the poem. He actually does it a couple times because he does it from 2 to 4, and then he does it from 5 to 7 with her gown has slipped down off her shoulders and stresses her gown.
Literary devices that uh, Ferlighetti uses are repetition. It's shown through the style of lines 2 through 13, with the he being in the only word of the line. It's also shown through lines 20 to 30, as it's starting with her following a description of her body, and the next line was her action. He also uses imagery throughout the poem. It shows a beautiful field scene with flowered fields and describing the woman beauty to contrast about what is actually going on during the poem. It also talks about the man when it says dark rectangular shapes on the man's robe, his eyes travel vertically, done emphasizing the size of the man, diminishing the woman's size. Happening while it says that she has the head of a dead swan. It's very, I don't know how to pronounce it, macabre, and has sinister connotations implying vulnerability. She's a victim. Um, Another literary device he uses is situational irony. It is shown through lines 51 through 58 because it shows a beautiful scene of love, but in reality, the man is pinning her down, assaulting her, and she is refusing to open her eyes to see it happening. Another literary device they used is enjambment. It's used all throughout the poem, and no sentence is like completely just in one line. The sentences drag over multiple lines, and stanzas never being truly complete as to like drag on the poem and to keep our interest. Other literary devices that are used are simile, like when it's talking about the delicacy and the limpness of the woman. They talk about it a lot.
The poem's meaning is the vulnerability of women and the dominance of men over a woman. Ferlighetti establishes the story's meaning from the first line of the poem. The poem is already suggesting a fairy tale like universe by calling it a plot. He refers to the brightly colored mass of flowers at the painting's base as the bed in the first section. The scene has. Oh, can you go back?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did it move? I'm so sorry.
The scene has changed to the lover's bedroom, a private and fragile setting. The poem's next 11 lines seem to be spoken in short breaths. Statements introducing the two lovers are broken up into sentences and spread out like a downward staircase through the page. The information about the immediacy of the lovers' embrace stumbles and falls easily, pausing at the word hungrily, which communicates the male lover's desire through repetition and simile.
Continuing the poem's meaning, the delicacy of the woman in the embrace is illustrated in a more similar way. Her hand like a dead, like hand like the head of a dead swan is a sign of her fragility and a morbid reminder of death. The subject is by no means light-hearted. The darkness and the romantic doom are beginning to appear. The darkness is intensifying as the poem continues. Lines continue to be short and clumsily positioned in a diagonal line pointing downwards. The hand that isn't a dead swan is a languid claw. In the first place, the description evaluates melancholy. The multicolored flowers and the harlequin robe are mentioned, but are not placed in a positive light. The mood is negative, darker than warm. Nothing is calm. Her feet are tensed. Tension in the painting is highlighted by tension in the story of the poem.
Here is my reaction of the poem. In the poem, it had like fairy tale like settings. It was showing a woman being dominated by a man, but the poem describes a mystical place and woman. It beautifully describes this like field, the setting with like flowered fields and beautiful flowers and all that. And it also describes a beautiful woman with beautiful hair and beautiful clothing, but she's refusing to like open her eyes to see the man, and she's also being pinned down. He was trying to describe a beautiful scene, but it shows the horrors of a woman being pinned down against her will. It actively shows her resisting, yet it takes a second to notice it because of the fantastical scene the authors put together. He decided to contrast the scene's imagery to what's actually going on to distract the horrors of the scene. I do think the poet does a good job at distracting the reader from the assault of the woman in the poem. It makes the reader have to think beyond the said actions and think about the intentions of those actions. I had to read it a couple times before I really realized what was going on. The first time I read it, I just thought they were talking about a beautiful scene with a beautiful woman and the man just admiring the woman. But once you read it again, you can see that he's actually manipulating her and assaulting her by pinning her down and having a hungry desire for her. And at the very last line, it said like the very last two lines of the poem, they say, um, she will not open. He is not the one. Talking about her eyes and how she's like being taken advantage of because he's not the one.
As to my reaction to the play, As the saying goes, all that glitters is not gold. All that superficially appears beautiful is not necessarily genuine. Images of romantic love can be nothing more than a thin veneer to envelop mistrust and disdain. Polished gold embellishments can be nothing more than a distraction for somebody decidedly less careful. Gustav Klimt's painting The Kiss, which is what the poem is about, seems well suited to scrutiny by a poet of the Beat movement. Beat poets were known for the rejection of society's romantic ideals. Beats would be quicker to point out the underlying tragedy of a story than to accept the story's proposed comfortable face value. Eager to point out irony and slow to accept superficial beauty, Ferlighetti and other Beats found a voice for their anti-establishmentarian ideas through poetry. In contrast, Gustav Klimt chose painting as a medium for expressing his criticism of the superficial society. At first glance, The Kiss seems to portray a gilded moment of affection, two lovers intertwine for a passionate embrace amid a sea of shimmery gold leaf and brightly colored flowers. Upon further inspection, the mood of the painting takes a different light. A sordid story exists here. Amongst all the gold and all the flowers, the story is the topic of Lawrence Ferlinghetti's poem, A Short Story on a Painting of Gustav Klimt. Ferlinghetti puts into words the images displayed in the painting. He employs measured diction and carefully placed similes to convey his attitude about the painting and about the culture the painting describes. His sentiment is at some points a rejection of oh, sentiment, yeah, a close observation of the world hidden beneath the glittery gold varnish. From the very first line of the poem, Ferlighetti sets the context of the story by even calling the poem a story. A certain fairy tale-like world is already implied. When he uses verbs such as like caught and holds, it really brings out the unwanted capture of the woman and the dominance of the man towards her. And it says still as an like adjective of time, showing how like it's just taking forever. Near the end of the poem, the lines break up less urgently and evenly separated verses compared to the evenly separated lovers. Him desperately wanting and her fragile intense, holds her so gently, so insistently, his nature being expressed in repetition, her eyes like folded like petals. In the final part of the poem, she will not turn her head nor open her flower-petaled eyes or dead swan hands to her eager lover. He is not the one. The brilliant gold world is a sham. The lovers are not in love. It also took me a couple times when I first read this poem to really understand what was happening because I wanted to see it in a good light, but then once you really read it and get into it, you can see how dark and like gloomy it really is and how the painting can be interpreted in so many different ways.